Hi, Dr. Liz here, and I'm doing a series on narcissistic parents. Now, I want to talk about what happens when a narcissistic parent dies, okay? Because this can be really complex for people going through grief, for children going through grief, adult children of the narcissistic parent. And often they feel relief. And that's very confusing to them unless they've had some education around the fact that that's normal. It is normal to feel relief when a narcissistic parent dies. Okay? I went through this myself, and my narcissistic mother died in 2013, and I had a business partner at the time who was a specialist in grief, and so she really helped me navigate some of that. I was incredibly sad. The sadness was actually very surprising to me because she had been emotionally abusive for a very long time, but at the end she had Alzheimer's and had really lost her mind for several years, which surprisingly felt very healing to me because then she reverted to a childlike state, and so a lot of the abuse stopped, honestly. Like, it stopped. She didn't have the mental capacity to do that anymore, to put me down, to question my choices, to guilt me, all this different stuff stopped. So there was that period, but still pretty intense sadness came up when she did pass away, as well as relief. Like, this is done. I'm released now. I don't have to have this relationship that's been so painful to me in my life. So grief can get complicated when you have a narcissistic parent or an abusive parent. Okay, it is not all like one feeling. All kinds of different feelings come up. So please be aware of that. Also be aware those 5 stages of grief were disproved like 20 years ago. Okay, so people feel all those feelings that Elizabeth Kubler-Ross describes in the 5 stages of grief, but not in that order. There's no real stages. Also be aware that grief peaks at about 2 years after the death. So you have this initial period of intense feelings, and then it dies down a little bit, but you're still dealing with all the grief feelings as the holidays roll around, as birthdays happen, all these anniversaries. But the peak of that actually happens around 2 years after the person dies. So people will often wonder, like, is there something wrong with me? Why am I having these intense feelings again? Why is this still coming up for me? Please know that that's normal. Okay, there's nothing wrong with you. You are going through normal grief. Now, one way to work through that is to figure out what kind of internal relationship, kind of mental relationship are you now going to have with the person, because these people keep living, quote unquote, in our lives, right? In our minds and our hearts. And for an adult child of a narcissistic parent, that is a big decision, actually. Like, what kind of relationship do I have now with my parent? Because if you haven't done any work around this, any kind of therapy, then often that parent continues to have a large influence on your self-worth, on your self-esteem, on how you see yourself. Now, if you have done some of that work and you have begun to heal your self-worth, your self-esteem, your identity separate from them, then that's a slightly different process for you. In that relationship, in terms of memory, your memory of them and how you will remember them, or what you're going to do on the anniversary of their birthdays or deaths, that becomes a little bit easier task if you have that internal sense of worth, okay, internal sense of, I'm okay, everything is okay here, and I can continue my life, and now I can actually live my life in a very full way and release perhaps some of the guilt that went along with that relationship, or some of the obligation that went along with that relationship. That's really important to release as a grown-up child. So those feelings come up and you're like, okay, no longer obligated here, no longer struggling here, no longer have to deal with that aspect of this relationship, but still needing to think about some of the internal aspects of the relationship. I know for me, I did some pretty deep hypnosis, a core healing hypnosis, and worked on some forgiveness and compassion with my mother, with both my parents, but in particular my mother. And that really helped me heal from that relationship and have a much better sense of myself, really, like a better, more solid sense of who I was. And that was in my 40s that I did that. So, it is never too late. I say that, right? Like 40s is not even that old to do that. A lot of people start therapeutic work in their 40s, sometimes their 30s. And if you're a therapist, maybe in your 20s even, I don't know. Like people do therapeutic work all along their lifetime, their lifeline, really. But I'm just saying it's not atypical for someone to come in their 40s or their late 30s when perhaps they've had kids or they want to work on this stuff or they're changing careers. All kinds of stuff happens around there where they're like, okay, I want to work on my relationship with my narcissistic parent, whether they're still alive or whether they've passed away. And really that's about working on your relationship with yourself. Okay, who are you? Because a narcissistic parent will overwhelm you. They'll try to make you into who they want to be. And they try to make their approval of you very, very important, which it naturally is as a child because your survival is based on it. But as you grow up into an adult, it really should be less important to you. It shouldn't overwhelm or guide your life. And often children of narcissistic parents find that it does. So there's some work to be done there. All right, I'm going into other topics now, and this video was really about grief when a narcissistic parent dies. So I'm going to go ahead and wrap up. Remember, there's stuff over at my website, drlizhypnosis.com, like free hypnosis files, meditations, and I'd be happy to work with you if you want to come into my office. I am a specialist in adult children of narcissistic parents. Okay, but I do hypnosis all over the world, so I can work with you on a hypnosis kind of basis, but in terms of talk therapy, only in Florida. Okay, so I'll talk to you soon. Peace.